Welcome to Every New Day, and this is NTV. And today we're doing a deep dive into three major developments involving President Donald Trump. First, the recent US government shutdown and how Trump factored in. Second, the unfolding release of Epstein Files and how that touches Trump. And third, a provocative commentary piece from the Brussels Signal on Trump's broader media war, focusing on the article BBC Against Trump, Wrong Man with Whom to Pick a Fight. I'll walk you through what happened, the political implications, and what it means for Trump's positioning going forward. Let's jump in. Let's start with the government shutdown. In November of this year, the United States narrowly avoided a federal government shutdown after a funding deal was reached.
All of this and the pain that the Democrats have caused during this reckless and completely unnecessary affair, and you could call it the Schumer shutdown or the Democrat shutdown. Open up the country first.
Democracy is imperiled.
Senate Democrats held the floor late into the night to protest the Trump administration.
The shutdown has led to a number of staffing shortages at air traffic control centers, resulting in delays and temporary ground stops at several airports.
It's hard enough just going to work. Now when you add in not getting paid, that's when you just like multiply the level of pressure. Air traffic is a safety sensitive position. The margin of error is zero. So if you think about it, it's pressure on top of pressure when you don't know exactly when you'll get paid based on politics.
O'Neill's other coping methods are less soothing. She says she has to think about rationing meals and gas, or even going without medical visits to treat her diabetic neuropathy.
If I don't have income, then I can't make those appointments. I may reschedule them or have to cancel them.
Other federal employees and contractors who were furloughed or laid off because of the shutdown are coping by canvassing job fairs.
Are you familiar with the organization?
Like this one we attended in Silver Spring, Maryland.
What do you make of the fact that Congress still hasn't been able to resolve this?
It's ridiculous. You're playing with people's livelihoods. People got to pay rent, pay their, bills, utilities.
Melissa Westbrook, a 22-year employee at the Department of Defense, was one of hundreds of furloughed federal workers who lined up around the block at this Maryland food bank.
But we've got to get our government open, and the Democrats are trying to keep it closed.
According to an article in the Washington Post, the standoff ended without Democrats achieving their main goal of extending Affordable Care Act tax credits. Shutdowns historically often backfire as a political tactic. What's key for Trump is how he responded. While the mechanics of the deal were largely congressional, Trump's posture, both during and after, shaped the narrative. He and his supporters painted the funding fight as a test of MAGA control versus the establishment. Why it matters? Avoiding a shutdown removes a major governance crisis, but the fact it nearly happened gives Trump and his allies something to say about saving the government, or conversely, being blamed for brinkmanship. My take: the shutdown episode sets the stage for the next part of our story, the diversion into the Epstein Files, because the timing overlaps and Trump is now trying to separate himself from a narrative of chaos while being under fire from new investigations. Now to the second major story. The files relating to Jeffrey Epstein have once again come into sharp relief.
I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years.
Yet, a tape in the NBC archives of a Mar-a-Lago party shows Trump giving Epstein his personal attention. The footage, shot in November of 1992, before Trump opened the resort as a club, shows the future president surrounded by cheerleaders for the Buffalo Bills. More than a decade before his guilty plea on state prostitution charges.
His death was officially ruled a suicide, but the circumstances were suspicious. Cameras around Epstein's cell apparently malfunctioned. The two guards who were supposed to be on suicide watch failed to check his cell and falsified records to imply otherwise.
For years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help. And I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. and I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. I'm glad I did, if you want to know the truth.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book.
FBI.
But who? That is, I mean, there's...
Oh, that's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
President Donald Trump was mulling the ouster of FBI Director Kash Patel. 3 unnamed sources claiming President Trump was considering removing Kash Patel as FBI Director in the coming months as he and his top aides have grown increasingly frustrated by the unflattering headlines Patel has recently generated. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, putting this out on X, saying this story is completely made up. In fact, when this fake news published, I was in the Oval Office where President Trump was meeting with his law enforcement team, including FBI Director Kash Patel. I read the headline to the president and he laughed. He said, "What? That's totally false. Come on, Kash, let's take a picture to show them you're doing a great job. Do not believe the fake news."
Let me refresh your memory with this clip.
Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
So you finished that December 2023 interview with a challenge to the FBI and harsh words for Republicans in Congress for not getting the Epstein files out to the public. Now the Black Book is under your direct control. So why haven't you released the names of Epstein's co-conspirators in the rape and sex trafficking of young women and girls? Stop that. I'm not blaming anybody other than you. You're not keeping your word. It's coming out in dribs and drabs. Why don't you just release the entire file as you promised to do?
Let's talk about the witness interviews. 302s of witness interviews. Those are not subject to the court order. Those are not subject to any fictional sealed order for a search warrant. Why aren't you releasing those with the redacted names of the victims? You are hiding the Epstein files, Mr. Patel. You are part of the cover-up.
Any allegations that I'm a part of a cover-up to protect child sexual trafficking and victims of human trafficking and sexual crimes is patently and categorically false.
In The Guardian, a live update reports that the U.S. Department of Justice will release the Epstein-related files within 30 days after Congress forced the measure. According to CBS News, the bill to force release, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, cleared Congress almost unanimously and is headed to the president's desk. The Wikipedia entry also confirms the Act HR 4405 requires the DOJ to release all documents related to Epstein. Well, what does this mean for Trump? He has long denied wrongdoing or knowledge of Epstein's crimes. The timing of the files release may force disclosure of names, emails, communications, some of which may involve high-profile figures.
We're seeking to pass legislation out of this committee that would force the disclosure and the transparency and the truth being made public. We had a chance today that Senator Cornyn blocked to make the truth known to the American public, to force out the truth regarding the Epstein files and the lies and the obfuscation that is happening by this administration.
As ABC News explains, the files vote ripped MAGA apart in internal conflict, albeit not totally destroying the movement. This is because of many previous supporters of Trump and his administration who were in favor of full transparency and the release of the Epstein files, as well as convictions for all and any high-profile personalities. However, in the last year, the way in which the administration and Trump have dealt with the Epstein files, claiming most of it is a hoax and that it was a ploy from the Democrats, has divided many supporters within the MAGA movement.
I was called a traitor by a man that I fought for 6 years for. And I gave him my loyalty for free. I won my first election without his endorsement, beating 8 men in a primary. And I've never owed him anything.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, just for context, was one of the president's most staunchest allies here. And so, this recent kind of pivot and then her announcing that she will resign from Congress in early January took a lot of people by surprise. But in recent days, certainly the president has lashed out at MTG. And today he said, for some reason, primarily that I refuse to return her never-ending barrage of phone calls. Marjorie went bad. He said that she went bad. Nevertheless, I will always appreciate Marjorie and thank her for her service.
And today you are going to see probably a unanimous vote in the House to release the Epstein files. But the real fight will happen after that. That this only became possible today because the American people, whom we serve as representatives here in Congress, demanded that this vote happen, and they put more pressure on every single elected politician in this city than has ever been put on them.
Ghislaine Maxwell has largely disappeared, and many of her alleged victims are still without justice. Ghislaine Maxwell has denied any allegations of wrongdoing brought against her.
Ordering the Justice Department to release what are known as the Epstein Files within 30 days now awaits President Trump's signature.
The president has said he will sign the measure after abruptly dropping his opposition over the weekend and called on Republicans to support the release of all documents connected to criminal investigations into the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
But obstacles remain. The bill gives Attorney General Pam Bondi the power to withhold information that would identify victims or jeopardize active federal investigations.
A bipartisan petition forcing the US House to vote on a bill mandating the release of the remaining Epstein files got the necessary signatures on Thursday, which means that it will go to the House for a vote next week.
The New York Post writes that House GOP staff circulated a memo accusing Democrats of pushing an anti-Trump hoax via selective email leaks from Epstein's estate. So the story is this: Trump faces new pressure from the release of these records. But at the same time, his team is trying to spin the timing as a partisan attack rather than genuine accountability.
Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi suggesting earlier this year that Epstein's client list was, quote, on her desk. And Trump has instead spent the past few months telling MAGA to look the other way and trying to reframe the story as a Democrat hoax. This didn't really work. There are three big divides within the MAGA movement: immigration, Epstein, and foreign policy.
Things that nobody can believe. $21 trillion will be the amount invested in the United States or committed to invest in 1 year. So I'm here 9 months. We're up to almost $18 trillion.
He is angry because he feels that the conservative establishment, Ben Shapiro all the way up to some idiot Republican senator, all of them are telling the same lie. We're on your side, but they're not.
I voted for Donald Trump and really starting to regret my vote because this isn't what I voted for. I voted for a lot more people to go to jail. I voted for a lot more politicians to be stripped of their power and put in prison for the crimes that they've committed against humanity.
I was done with MAGA at the moment he looked us in the face and he said, "What files?" Right? What are we still talking about? Jeffrey Epstein? Pam Bondi said it was a Democrat hoax. No, I think the entire nation has been hoaxed by Republicans and Democrats.
I vote for Donald Trump. I regret it because I needed these changes sooner. I needed the prices to go down sooner.
If he invades Venezuela or gives more money to Ukraine, his movement will dissolve.
The American dream will officially be dead, and millions of voters will forever associate MAGA with its decline.
MAGA is dead. Now we're in the America First debate. Soon it's going to be the America Only debate.
The overlap, the shutdown story provided a distraction window, but now the Epstein files are front and center. Will Trump be blindsided or able to manage the narrative? Now let's turn to the commentary piece from Brussels Signal titled BBC Against Trump, Wrong Man with Whom to Pick a Fight. In this article, journalist Kevin Myers launches an aggressive critique of the BBC, calling it a cult that lies repeatedly, operating at so many levels of dysfunctionality. He connects this media culture critique to Trump. Quote, "So MAGA takes on the taxpayer-subsidized cult that is the BBC. By God, the Beeb deserves whatever it gets." Myers positions Trump as the anti-establishment figure who identified the loathing that ordinary people feel for these liberal disorders and turned it into a powerful political movement. Why include this piece? Because it illustrates how Trump's team and allies are framing his media conflicts globally. This isn't just about the US. It's a broader cultural war narrative. In the context of our earlier segments, the shutdown narrative allows Trump to claim institutional mastery or rescue. The Epstein Files threatened to pull him into unprecedented legal and reputational risk. The media war commentary, this Brussels signal piece, frames the narrative as Trump versus the liberal media establishment. Therefore, the article serves as a window into how the messaging is being constructed. Interpretation: whether you agree or not with the article's tone, it shows how Trump's base is being prepared to view any investigation or media coverage as bias rather than legit scrutiny. That has implications for public perception and for how Trump might respond to Epstein file fallout. Putting it all together, what are the implications for Trump and for US politics? 1. Risk exposure. The Epstein files could reveal previously unreported connections or communications. Even if Trump is not directly implicated, being mentioned in these files keeps the story alive and can lean into a narrative of corruption or cover-up. 2. Narrative control. Trump's camp is trying to frame the release and subsequent media coverage as partisan warfare, not justice. The Brussels Signal article is one example of how the message is being crafted for Trump's international and domestic audience. 3. Political leverage. The shutdown story lets Trump claim influence and strength, but if future funding fights or government dysfunction resumes, it undercuts that claim. 4. Media and culture war. The commentary about the BBC and liberal disorders shows the broader ideological frame Trump is using: establishment versus outsiders, mainstream media versus alternative narrative. This may help galvanize his base, but also deepen opposition. 5. MAGA internal dynamics. As ABC News pointed out, the Epstein Files issue caused rifts within MAGA, including with loyalists like Marjorie Taylor Greene. A divided base is a risk for Trump going into his next phase of political activity. And 6. Timing and optics. Because the Epstein Files bill passed during the funding fight, the optics suggest a confluence of major governance and transparency issues. If Trump handles it well, he could come out stronger. If not, the narrative of chaos and cover-up wins. My verdict: Trump faces a challenging crossroads. The structural risk of the Epstein Files is real, but his advantage lies in his command of narrative and ability to reframe attacks as ideological warfare. The shutdown story reinforced his political positioning. Now, we'll see whether the Epstein Files narrative allows him to reinforce it or undermine it.
If you were so concerned about the Epstein Files and protecting the victims, why didn't you do a darn thing about it for the 4 years of the Biden administration? All this stuff was sitting in a warehouse and nobody said a word about it. They didn't care. Now they're doing it. We all know why. Because they're trying to attack President Trump.
What to keep an eye on in the coming weeks. Will the DOJ release the files as required within 30 days, as the Guardian live feed indicates? And to what extent will they be redacted?
This story has been full of twists and turns. It starts with the Democrats releasing 3 emails from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. One says that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. A victim spent hours at my house with him. Another says the victim, Mar-a-Lago, Trump says he asked me to resign. Never a member ever, Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine Maxwell to stop. And then the third email is from Michael Wolff talking about Jeffrey Epstein's association with Trump, saying you can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, or if it looks like he really could win, you could save him generating a debt. Basically implying the idea that Epstein would have some kind of compromising information on Trump. But that was just the start of it, because then after that, the GOP came out swinging. They said Democrats whine about releasing the files, but they only cherry pick when they have them to generate clickbait. You deserve the full truth. And then they released over 20,000 files. Some of it had to do with Trump, some of it didn't. Importantly, 2 of the emails that were in there were some of the ones that the Democrats released, except they were unredacted in the GOP copy. And these lack of redactions are obviously very intentional. So we see first, I want you to realize the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And then it says, Virginia spent hours at my house with him. Now that name is really important because it's Virginia Giuffre. She was the Prince Andrew accuser, but importantly, she did not accuse Trump, rather saying that he couldn't have been friendlier. This obviously is one of the main reasons the GOP appears to have released this. It still is a mystery why he's behaving so strangely regarding Ghislaine Maxwell, why he's trying extensively to block the Epstein files. Look, it's a lot more than just Trump. Like, one person that got kind of a weird stray in all of this was the fact that Epstein talked about Hillary doing naughties with Vince. Vince being Vince Foster, a White House counsel. There was a rumor about Clinton and Vince having some kind of affair, and then later Vince was found dead.
How will Trump respond if his name or associates appear prominently in the released documents? Will he double down on the hoax narrative as documented in trusted sources, or shift strategy? Will this issue impact Trump's base ahead of any upcoming campaign activity, candidate debates, or primaries? Will internal MAGA splits widen? How will media coverage and alternative media respond? Will the frames push Trump's supporters into defensive posture, media bias, or will new revelations shift narratives? And finally, how will congressional investigations or hearings use the files as leverage? Will they generate new political pressure or legal exposure for Trump or his network? In closing, to summarize, we have 3 interacting elements here. The shutdown which Trump survived, and to some degree benefited from, the Epstein files which represent a latent threat, and the media ideological war narrative which Trump is actively embracing. How he manages the second while controlling the third will be key to his political fortunes. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss updates. I'll also link all my sources in the description below so you can dive deeper yourself. Drop a comment. How do you think Trump will respond? And what do you expect the Epstein files will reveal? Until then, see you next time. This was NTV.